thank you everyone for tuning in. My name is Ejaaz, I work at ConsenSys, and I'm pleased to present to you today a discussion with a stellar panel of individuals who will be jumping into the much anticipated launch of Ethereum 2.0, and in particular, staking your Ether. We have with us today Danny and Hsiao-Wei from the Ethereum Foundation, Collin from ConsenSys, and Tim Ogilvie from Staked. I'd like to kick off with a brief round of introductions. So in no particular order, let's go with Danny. Can you guys hear Danny? Oh, is there a...
No volume.
No.
Hsiao-Wei, do you want to kick off while Danny fixes his audio?
Okay, sure. So my name is Hsiao-Wei Wang. I'm from Ethereum Foundation research team, and I'm currently working with Danny to one part of the work as a foundation researcher is working on is to stake, especially, and also we are hi Danny, and also we are working. Yes. And also we are working on helping some deposit infrastructure, and also we'll try hard to push the ETH2 launch. And of course, staking is one of the big big component of the whole ETH2 session. So very happy to join this panel.
Great. Collin, you're up.
Danny?
Hey everyone, how's it going? Happy Friday. I'm Collin Myers. I work at ConsenSys Codefi, specifically a project called Activate, which is focused on launching decentralized networks, bootstrapping them, and increasing participation. As part of that efforts, we're doing a lot of stuff on the ETH2 front, primarily focused on validator research, validator economics, and some other cool stuff which we're going to announce in our next chat. So happy to be here and happy to be talking with everyone.
I also want to shout out Collin. It is his birthday today, so happy birthday.
Hey, yes,
Tim, you're up.
Sure. So I'm Tim Ogilvie. I'm the founder and CEO of Staked. We generally work with institutional investors, funds, custodians, exchanges to help them participate in proof-of-stake networks. That typically means helping them run the infrastructure behind the scenes and making it easy for them to participate.
And finally, Danny.
So you can hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Sweet. I'm Danny Ryan. Hsiao-Wei, I think, introduced a little bit of what we do. I work on some research, spec writing, and a lot of coordination on the project. Spending a lot of time working with client teams and test nets, and trying to get this software in the hands of the stakers ready for launch.
Awesome. So let's jump right into it. I'd like to kick things off with a common theme throughout this conference, and that's the launch of Phase 0, which will mark the first phase of Ethereum's transition to ETH 2.0 and allow people to stake Ether. When is Phase 0 planned to launch, and what stage of development are we currently at right now? Danny, maybe you want to kick us off.
Yeah, so I just listened to the panel right before us, which had some of the people that this is actually really in their hands at this point, people that are leading the client development. And there were those that said certainly Q3 and those that said Q3 or Q4. You know, they're the professionals at this point. They are incredible engineers, and they're intimately familiar with the challenges ahead. So that's where I put my money right now.
And what stage of development are we at, I guess? What is the kind of things that are holding back, locking down a date?
Mm-hmm. So testnets is where we're at. Testnets. We are, there are some single client testnets, but the big effort is multi-client testnets. You know, Ethereum has this ethos of, you know, a standard protocol that anyone can implement. And so we have this ethos of strength in multiple clients, multiple implementations of the protocol, but it brings its own challenges. And where we're currently at is getting all these clients to play nicely with each other. It's easy for you to come to consensus with yourself, with your own piece of software generally. But once you add others to the mix, other implementations, you find some of the bugs, some of the corner cases, some of the things that people interpreted differently in the spec. And so we're ironing through a lot of that. And it's testing at scale. It's these last little things that we're ironing out to get these clients production and mainnet ready. You've seen in the past, say, 4 months, awesome gains in resource consumption. For example, like a client could have 4 or 5 months ago been using 4 gigabytes of RAM, which is like huge, not something we really want to see. And now almost all these clients in mainnet settings are like itching below a gigabyte of RAM and making more gains there. So it's hardening clients. It's making them production ready in kind of every capacity and working through these multi-client efforts.
That's awesome. Ben in the previous call said he was kind of like thinking around weeks and months versus just kind of like, an abnormal section of time. So that's awesome to hear. Okay, so diving right into it, how exactly does this work? Can any of you walk me through a basic step-by-step process for staking my ETH?
I can shine some light. I mean, there will be a variety of different ways with it being open source and the nature of the industry. So people will be able to stake their ETH in a few different ways, but primarily we can probably just talk about the deposit process. I'll give some thoughts that I have about that, but eventually when the time comes and mainnet is here and the testnet has been worked out, everyone who has 32 ETH, there are some solutions for those under 32 ETH, but I guess I'll focus on the 32 ETH validator and above. Those individuals will have the opportunity to deposit their 32 ETH for the first time into the ETH1 chain. In return for doing so, they will receive key pairs. They will receive their validator key pairs, and then they will also receive a mnemonic for their withdrawal key, which they can claim later upon transferability being enabled, which is set for phase 2. So the way I kind of look at it is step 1 is deposit. Prior to depositing, you may have your own thoughts and opinions about which client you want to use or how you want to run the software. It can be done in a VM. It can be done on your own dedicated machine. It can be done in a machine left over in your house, or it can also be done in a more larger institutional perspective. But step 1 is to getting in the system, is getting deposited into the ETH1 chain, becoming active. And then in that meantime, between depositing and becoming active, figuring out what your setup looks like from an individual perspective. And there's one of the cool parts about ETH2 on the validator side is that there's so many different unique setups that we could see just based on how it's designed, as opposed to like a delegated proof of stake where it's pretty straightforward. You either delegate to someone else or you do it yourself with a set of more strict than ETH2 hardware requirements. So we'll see a lot of diversity as to what that looks like, but step 1 is depositing and getting in the system.
Okay.
And step 2 is keeping your software running.
Go ahead.
Just FYI that after this panel, Mara from ConsenSys and Carl from our research team will have a very detailed introduction of how to stake. So stay tuned with this. Yeah. And so I was just going to add, the process to staking is make those deposits, make those keys, secure the keys, get your setup, and then it's running software. It's running software with good uptime. And a lot of that should be handled, obviously, by robust clients being written, but you're kind of always on call. You have your duty. You've made a claim by putting your capital up that you're going to secure the network and you're going to have good uptime. And so monitoring your system, maybe enabling some notifications if things look fishy, and kind of going in and fixing things. In early days, it's going to be a little more hands-on than say a year or two from now. Just as the system becomes more robust, as these clients work through some of the kinks, even as you go to mainnet, there's going to be things we haven't necessarily seen before. So if you're coming in early, be ready to have some fun.
Awesome. I want to dig into two things that you raised there, Collin. One was you mentioned 32 ETH, and the other was being able to get your tokens back in phase 2. So a question posed to you all is, how does this work? If I stake, or if someone stakes more than 32 ETH or not a multiple of 32 ETH, what happens? And am I not able to get my ETH back until phase 2 has launched? And like, I know there's something about a one-way bridge. Could you guys explain a little bit more about how that works?
Sure. I can take a swing.
Yeah, I was going to say, go ahead, Tim.
Right. So if you have 3,200 ETH, for example, we typically work with larger holders. You need to make 100 individual deposits. If you have 32,000, you need to make 1,000 individual deposits. You then need to run 1,000 validator clients. And so the responsibilities of having multiple kind of quants of the 32 ETH grow as you get into those things. That's a role stake tends to play in this, making a lot of that easy so that people like that can participate without having to do DevOps on 1,000 individual clients. In terms of when you get your capital back, it will depend on transfers being enabled on ETH2 or some bridge between ETH1 and ETH2, both of which are in subsequent phases. So you are making a commitment to stake and participate in ConsenSys, but you are not going to get your funds out until future phases.
Yeah. So phase zero is the Wild West in certain respect. I know it has an unknown lockup associated with it, and there are risks, because of that. And as somebody with ETH who's interested in staking, you have to take that into account. And so I do expect lower validation numbers earlier because of this associated risk. But there's also a mechanism in protocol to reward those, when there are lower participation numbers. So, I hope it's a boon for hobbyists. I hope, people that are holders, people that are like long-term ETH believers get in on this thing and get some great returns early on. And as features are added, as liquidity is enabled, the system growing and more of the institutions coming involved and everyone getting in. And one thing to note, just for a tidbit, so each 32 ETH is like an instance in the protocol and has its own little responsibilities. And we do this because each of these validator instances in the protocol, when shards are added or kind of distributed, their roles are distributed across the shards, and we do it kind of for protocol accounting purposes. So, if you have 5 validators, then you might all of a sudden be validating 5 shards at any given time, just to have a better mental model of what's going on there.
One question I do have, Danny, actually, on top of that, which I think is kind of curious for everyone to understand, is there's been some talk about like a top-up functionality being included to top up your validator. So I guess my main question is, until that's put in, what if I deposit less than 32 ETH? And what
actually exists today. That exists today. A deposit, if you look at the deposit contract, it can take anywhere from 1 to infinite ETH as a deposit. So the minimum you can deposit is 1 ETH. In this mechanism, this would create, if you just had 1 ETH against your validator key, you would be a validator, but you would just never get activated. So it's not really a great strategy. You shouldn't just send 1 ETH. But if you are a 32 ETH validator, you've already been activated, and say something strange happens, you're offline for like 6 months, and you've lost like a little bit of ETH, and for some reason, like you have some extra capital and you want to top it up, so that you can kind of add to the security that you're bringing and get your rewards back up and going. In that case, you can actually submit another deposit on ETH1 for the same validator key, at which point, when that deposit is processed into the beacon chain, you get that kind of credited to your account. So there's some flexibility. Generally, being offline is not very serious. As long as the chain is generally healthy, then you stand to lose about as much as you stood to make. So if returns are about 10% per year, you could lose about 10% per year if you're offline for the entire year. But there's some cases where chain's not finalizing, and if you had some like serious technical issues, you might have lost like a little bit more than that, and you might use this top-up mechanism to kind of get back to a safe place.
Cool. I kind of want to switch gears now and piggyback off something you just said, Danny, which is the Ethereum community is pretty passionate about, securing Ethereum's success. You're hoping that a bunch of hobbyists stake when phase 0 goes live. But when it comes down to Ethereum 2.0 security, incentives are going to play a huge role. So what kind of economic returns can stakers expect to make in phase 0?
So I know Collin's done a lot of work on this.
Yeah, I actually updated my model this morning with ETH at a new price. But so I think before we talk about that, one thing to remember about like risk taking, bootstrapping the system, and people participating in the community is that there is a threshold that needs to be met for Genesis to start. Currently, that's 524,288 ETH, which is around 16,000 plus validators. Until that point is reached, actually, no one receives rewards. It's kind of more of an altruistic push to get over that hurdle, which is why the community is so important from that perspective. So once Genesis is hit, that's kind of in my eyes from an economic perspective, how I viewed where we begin and where people can begin expecting for their risk to be compensated. And also phase 0 is also kind of a continuum. It's not a set time period. So the way that we've kind of looked at phase 0 is how much do we think is going to get staked in the total network over the course of that time period, which is an unknown time period. We've looked at phase 0 is anywhere between 12 and 18 months, with even some projections of 24 months, and going from 524,000 to around 5 million ETH staked. I believe is probably by the time phase 1 is initiated, that's probably where we'll be at. At a network level perspective, at Genesis, it's 20.3%. And then at 5 million ETH staked, it drops down to 6.6%. And that's without cost built into your structure. So again, there's a variety of different setups that people can choose. We've mainly focused on the at-home approach or the individual approach. So I'll kind of speak on that, and then would love to hear Tim's thoughts about more on the institutional approach. But from that perspective, it's, you have two options. Do I use a machine at home? What does that cost me? Or do I run it in the cloud? And, what does that cost me? The costs of both of those are fairly similar. And over the course of, let's just talk about what it costs me to be a validator as a percentage of my rewards. So I think that's something interesting to look at. So starting from Genesis, which is again 524,000 ETH staked, you're looking at 4.75% is what it will cost you. And then as more ETH is staked into that network, it costs you more because your rewards are less. So at 5 million ETH staked in the network with either a VPS or an at-home setup, the cost of that for you is about 14.7%, which results in your net issuance essentially being between 17% and 3.7% from Genesis until 5 million ETH staked. So I guess that was a lot. One thing to just remember when we're thinking about rewards in ETH2 is that the network is designed to be highly open, which results in variability in returns. I don't think that rewards should be looked at as volatile, but they do vary as it is an open system where anyone can come in and out of it. So they will vary over time. And honestly, I believe that probably after you receive your rewards is probably the best way to know what they're going to be. So establishing ranges is probably the best we can do until the thing goes live. So I'm super excited to see how that pans out.
Cool. I want to kind of touch upon the demand side of this model. So these are like estimations that you've kind of built and worked on a lot. ConsenSys released a report a few days ago, I think, which surveyed a community of ETH holders. And it turns out that Roughly about a third expect to set up and run their own validating infrastructure, as you mentioned. But another third are actually planning to use a third-party staking as a service provider. Now, question directed towards you, Tim, to kick off. Is this something staking as a service providers are aware of, and are they preparing to support demand like this?
Well, we're ready for demand. We work with a bunch of large holders of ETH who want to participate, and they don't want to hire in-house DevOps resources to manage the servers and ensure they're secure and ensure no double signing. So yeah, I think the demand varies. If you're a fund focused on short-term trading strategies, ETH2 is incredibly scary and they want nothing to do with it. But we also work with a lot of people who are long-term holders of ETH, and they have very strong belief in the vision, want to participate, support the network, but don't want to think about security and safety and things like that. And so I think because of the combination of rewards and the fact that people want to participate in ETH2, you're going to see a fairly high degree of demand early on. There are a lot of people mobilizing to participate.
And just to clarify, are you saying those long-term holders aren't institutions?
They run the gamut. I mean, you've got exchanges and custodians who act as large holders of ETH, and then there are people who have been with Ethereum since the get-go who hold a lot of ETH personally. And some of those people are going to set up their own setups, and others are going to work with third parties like Staked to ensure that they're set up in a globally distributed way that's, meets the security requirements that they want to think about.
Whilst we're on the topic, I want to bring the conversation around fees for a second, because you mentioned exchanges. Staking providers typically take a percentage of rewards generated by a user's stake in exchange for providing that service. Joseph Chow actually released an article recently which said that stakers should actually demand free staking, and we see examples of this with Binance, for example. Is this something you think all staking providers would need to end up offering? And won't this end up leading to a large amount of ETH staked quite centrally among a few entities? And how does that kind of bear for Ethereum's future?
So centralization is a real issue. ETH is held by large exchanges and custodians predominantly. But I think, they're not the boogeyman. They think about things like making sure that networks are globally decentralized. They think about things like ensuring that their stake is not sitting in one basket in a way that where it could either be subject to slashing or other things. I think security is not free, and so it's kind of okay to say let's have a free staking model. But if you want a highly secure, highly decentralized network, someone's going to pay for it. And so whether that's the exchange through trading fees or that's paying a third party who is an expert in security and running these networks, that's a decision I think stakers will make.
Mm-hmm. And so, something I'd like to note that should probably be written more about. I think it's a very important component of the design that is probably little known. I imagine some of the institutions are beginning to digest this, but it's important nonetheless. There are anti-correlation mechanisms, anti-correlation incentives inside of the ETH2 protocol, specifically in two places. One, if you go offline and you're not highly correlated with others, then as I stated earlier, you stand to lose about as much as you stand to make. But if you go offline and it's correlated with others and the chain can no longer finalize, then you are, you lose a little bit, but as time progresses, you actually start to lose a lot. You enter into what we call an inactivity leak or a quadratic leak. And so another mechanism is the slashing. If you get flashed and you're not correlated with others, no one recently got flashed. It was just a bug in your software. You lose a little bit of capital. You get a slap on the wrist and you get ejected. from the validator set. But if a lot of people get slashed, as in there's a coordinated attack, or there's some sort of like hack on a major staking provider, or even just like a bug in a piece of software because we were all running the same piece of software, then you stand, these slashing penalties scale according to the size of those others that were being slashed. So when I'm making a decision, say I don't want to run locally, it's not for me. I'm making a decision on which staking providers I want to be a part of, or even like what clouds I might enter into. Part of one, I want somebody with good uptime, I want somebody with good reputation, I want somebody that can handle their shit. But I also, if I have an inkling that staking provider A has 20% of the network, then I know that if staking provider A messes up, there's actually more risk for me. And so I might find staking provider B that has 5% of the network, but also has a solid reputation, and that risk profile balances off better with me. So if there's good education on this, I think we get some solid decentralization properties out of it. If there's not, then when some of these events that are in the tail risk happen, then people are going to lose more money, and then they're probably going to learn. So either learn now, make some good decisions up front, or if and when some of this stuff happens, that's when I think we'll see some redistribution.
Yeah, and I think you see investors are pretty savvy to that dynamic and actually make those decisions on other proof of stake networks to naturally decentralize the stake. So, and I expect with the combination with incentives that are built into ETH2, you'll get that same dynamic.
On the pricing front, I think it's important to talk about what exists today in proof of stake and how ETH2 is different, which then also kind of drives through to incentives and also provider pricing. Ethereum 2 being pure proof of stake, there isn't like an in protocol built incentive model for someone that you would delegate your stake to. Most of the other delegated proof of stake protocols, this is included in the protocol and can be set and automated and actually can be performed non-custodial by everyone who's operating inside of that ecosystem. ETH2 poses some different challenges because there's keys involved and also the non-transferability during phase 0. So taking a cut of the rewards is going to be different. It also depends on what type of service that you offer. But ultimately, I think ETH2 is probably more of a subscription-based model. But it doesn't align incentives as well as a delegated proof of stake protocol, in my opinion, because both of which are kind of incentivized to stay up and to increase rewards for the users, if you will. Whereas with a subscription model, it's kind of as a validator, you're not necessarily incentivized to outperform if possible. So I think it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out without this incentive fee being built into the protocol itself, and it'll need to take place outside of the protocol. And even in phase 0, if you're trying to charge as a means of monetization a percentage of the rewards, they're locked. So how would you even do that without instituting some other type of pricing model? So it'll be pretty innovative. I think there's multiple different approaches. I think the approach will be tied to what your setup looks like. If you're a provider in this space and you're just providing beacon nodes and the user is in control of their keys and running their own validator clients and you're just there to provide that uptime, that's probably more susceptible to some type of subscription model. So it'll be interesting.
Okay. I want to switch gears.
There's a little bit of. Please. There's a little bit of there are some interesting things that you can do with the design today. One, the distinction between signing keys and withdrawal keys. With a type of key exchange prior to initiation with an exchange or with a staking provider, I can actually retain the withdrawal keys rather than granting them to them, so that if something goes wrong, they can't necessarily run away with my funds. But as we move into subsequent phases of phase 1.5, like the integration of ETH1 into ETH2 and a full-blown phase 2, and smart contracts are more closely integrated into the near the staking, I think there will be a lot of more greenfield for design and different ways to structure staking and offer more opportunity at that point. But right now, I think you're right, Collin. There are limited designs, especially with the non-transferability of funds in phase 0, for how these relationships might be structured.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how those models actually develop. So switching gears, I saw a tweet the other day by Preston from Prismatic Labs saying that their ETH2 testnet has more nodes than some mainnet ETH killers. Now, there's a lot of these proof of stake based protocols that have and are about to launch. As we enter the final stretch to kicking off ETH2, how does the future of Ethereum weigh up against these ETH killers? Are we too late? Have they discovered something that we've missed, or what are your thoughts?
I have all sorts of thoughts, but I'll let somebody else go.
Go ahead, Tim.
We run on a bunch of those networks, and I think Ethereum by design has a lot of validators built into the design of ConsenSys, and some networks that we work on, things like Cosmos or Polkadot, will have 100 validators or 200 validators. And so I think, people are going to vote with their wallets or their smart contracting skills to figure out, is the network decentralized enough, developed enough in terms of developer resources? I don't think I'd bet against Ethereum.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, it's been pretty interesting to see the whole thing evolve, right? As ETH2 being a multi-year research study, and also such an open source effort that there's a lot of people on the outside that like to criticize its progress, but honestly, it's taking something that already exists today and then transitioning into an entirely new model is. It takes time. Other proof of stake chains should go first. We should observe the validators' behavior. We should observe how those ecosystems develop. And at the end of the day, as blockchains mature, there's this, obviously in proof of stake, there's this balance that needs to be between supply and demand. On the supply side of the equation in a proof of stake network, the business model is pretty straightforward. So we've seen loads of innovation. We've seen people step into that space. Most of them are validating empty blocks for the most part, to be honest with you, to some degree. But what Ethereum has, which no one else has, is the strongest demand side of the equation. So there will always be people there to provide the supply side, because it's call it a Web 2.5 business model. It kind of makes sense. Demand is something that can't be created overnight. It takes many years to get demand. It involves developers, it involves infrastructure, it involves tooling, education. It involves all these things, and it's very hard to do that. I think the main reason behind this, it's been interesting, but Ethereum is probably the only thing that I've seen that transcends language. It transcends gender. It transcends religion. It transcends location. It transcends all these things, and it's like a common language that people have gathered around. And I don't think there can be many of those, and potentially only one, because it's such a large human coordination effort to get everyone to participate in this thing.
Yeah, totally agree that. We are slow. Part of reason is because we are big enough, and while that. I think we're looking forward to observing and learning from other projects at this point, and see how that could improve our phase 2 design, especially. And in the end of the day, that blockchain is about collaboration. In my mind, that we have some collaborative research between the different projects, and that's what I think is good for the whole industry.
Awesome.
Yeah. Now, building E2 is an extension of building Ethereum. And building Ethereum is building it in a massively distributed way across the whole world with a ton of different people. And there are some distinct benefits from this. Obviously, mainly because we have tons of different input. We have tons of resilience. Somebody we're not relying on any individual, any entity for any of the things really in Ethereum. And building ETH2 is a natural extension of that. It's a fostering of the many different teams and communities around the world that build and love this thing and will carry it forward for years to come. This isn't built on the backs of like one dev team in San Francisco that we're kind of like cracking the whip on. This is like an open source collaborative community that is the basis of like what Ethereum needs to be and what a distributed and decentralized network needs to be. And honestly, I don't think we're moving that slow. This thing is like complicated and incredible and exciting and fantastic. And it's just, if you're going to do it right. We're shipping, and that's all I got to say.
Awesome. We have about 5 minutes left, so I want to kind of get into some topical areas very quickly. So price is often a topic that's frequently shied away from as a point of discussion, but I want to dig into it a little here. Say, for example, there's suddenly a significant percentage of circulating supply of Ether locked in staking. What does this mean for the value of the asset? Should it affect it in any way? Is this somehow correlated to security? Biased and unbiased opinions, all welcome.
Yeah, interesting question. From my perspective, I think anticipation, the desire to acquire, to participate, if participating is made easier, bringing that into the system will reduce liquidity on top of the issuance schedule also being much less than what it is today in a mature ETH2 sense. And I also think that it will drive demand for people who want to use it, because there's some people who've been waiting to use it, and to use it, you have to have the asset to use it. So I personally see, I guess, an increase in price because of that movement, due to it being locked up. I'm more curious to see what happens with the shift of ETH that's locked in other protocols, whether it be tokenless protocols or other things that now result in maybe it shifting out of those and back into ETH2. That could be a negative for the whole DeFi ecosystem, which could actually be a negative on the price. So I'm interested to see where the shift of those who already know how to stake ETH, but in a different manner, what are they going to do with their ETH? Are they going to shift it over, and what does that process look like, and how will it affect the current ecosystem?
So have you got a price you want to share with us, or you keep that to yourself?
I'm personally interested in getting back in around 150 to 175 personally in the short term.
To round things off, final question before we jump off. Proof of stake versus proof of work security. How did the two compare? What are the advantages or disadvantages does proof of stake bring? There's all the Bitcoin.
Proof of work is simple. That's the distinct advantage of proof of work, is that it's simple. Most of the complexity is taken out of the protocol and put into this piece of hardware, which obviously there's tons of complexity there. There's like a whole industry on building ASICs and stuff. But in terms of the protocol, it's much more simple. And proof of stake, we believe, has much stronger security advantages and guarantees, partially because the protocol is the asset that is fundamental to the crypto economic protocol is in protocol. And so not only can we reward it, but we can penalize it and put it at risk. And so doing so, we actually get a stronger security guarantees. But again, they're much more complex protocols. Like the ConsenSys protocol and Geth, like is damn simple. Like all the complexity in Geth is managing state and execution and transactions. And like the ConsenSys, like you just kind of get that for a given. Whereas ETH2, if you look at an ETH2 client, those are purely, like Phase 0 is purely ConsenSys protocol. And all the complexities lie in that. And some of that is because it's a sharded ConsenSys protocol. But yeah, complexity versus, some nicer security properties, in my opinion.
I think there's another dynamic too, though, which is that a proof of stake asset is actually more valuable than a proof of work asset, because you rather than distributing your security budget out to a group of external miners who are external to the protocol, it actually gets returned to the holders of ETH. And that means that your asset is actually more valuable because it's got a yield that comes in over time from that security.
Yeah, not to mention these proof of stake assets are much more widely available and liquid, so that those that aren't necessarily very rich and very entrenched in supply chains can actually compete and get involved in these protocols. And these assets, your crypto economic asset doesn't necessarily degrade over time, whereas there's an ongoing cost of reinvestment in proof of work to kind of keep up. And some of those gains are actually realized in lower issuance and proof of stake protocols.
Okay, cool. Well, I think we're just about at time. Thank you all for joining, and thank you all for tuning in and listening. See you later.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.